We've recently taken a deep dive into the supply chain problems happening right now with videos on trucking, cargo ships, the labor shortage, the global energy crisis, shortages amidst abundance, and what to do when the panic buying starts. Don't treat the bearer of bad news as if they were to blame for it. Still, I have to tell you the majority of experts, port operators, truckers, supply chain experts, economists, and more all agree on two things. We haven't yet seen the end of this growing problem, and we can't accurately forecast a date of when it will get better. Are we now looking at a system collapse at the ports? In this video, we'll cut through the sound bites and do a deep dive on the ports. 90% of global trade is carried by sea. And these points of destination, ports, are critical pieces of the global supply chain network that are having massive problems. Think of them like the valves in your arterial system. When they're closed or blocked, the blood stops flowing. Here, we will explore the problems the ports are experiencing, and I'll go on a limb and actually suggest a possible solution. More importantly, I'll tell you what you should expect through the holiday season in the first quarter of next year based upon what we can see right now. So let's jump in. Please consider subscribing to our newsletter by clicking on the link in the description and comment section below. If you enjoy this video, please subscribe and click the like button to help the channel grow. Port problems. The United States has 28 container ports around its coastline. The vessel backlog is being experienced by ports across the country and demonstrates the supply chain's vulnerability. On the West Coast, packages are often manufactured in Asia, loaded onto a ship, sailed across the Pacific, unloaded at a port, transferred to truck or train or both, moved into a warehouse, and finally delivered to retail outlets or doorsteps. Ports from Seattle, Tacoma to LA, Long Beach, and San Diego are all reporting a record number of ships at anchor. Pre-pandemic, it was unusual for more than one ship to be in the waiting line at the Los Angeles, Long Beach, Santa Ana Port Complex, which handles more than half of all American imports. Now, over 100 container ships are floating idly in the water, awaiting their chance to offload. Many are adrift as they can't find a place to anchor. The East Coast, the ports for the rest of the world, are just as congested. 1/3 of the nation's gross domestic product is produced within 250 miles of the ports of New Jersey and New York. And these ports, along with ports down the coast to Miami and around through the Gulf of Mexico, are all backed up, with lines of container ships anchored in the water awaiting their turn. The current administration has pushed for a 24/7 model for ports at least until the blockage is resolved. This will help, but it won't solve the more significant problem, and it creates a storage problem that depends on rail, driver, and chassis availability. The overview. Raw material producers load materials on ships for transport to processing and manufacturing plants worldwide, but are connected in the Pacific and the Indian Ocean. Manufacturers produce products, fill containers, and ship those products to top consuming countries in Europe via the Suez or the United States via Pacific Ocean freight lines. The containers are offloaded at ports. In a perfect world, in less than 7 days, the container is loaded onto a truck or rail line and is on its way to warehouses, retailers across the globe. The container is often taken to a facility and unpacked because it comprises a multitude of shipping orders, and the container isn't all one order. Wherever it gets unpacked, it needs to get to that location and its final location via truck, van, or train. When it's all working well, you hardly notice that the shirt you ordered shipped in a mere week or two from Tianjin to your doorstep. And barring a few hiccups in the system or problems here and there, the system operated rather fluidly. That was before a global shift in spending priorities. That was before worldwide shutdowns. That was before rounds of stimulus money meant to keep people afloat and spur economic growth. That was before demand far outstripped manufacturing and shipping capacity. Labor. The reason for the congestion at the ports are many. Labor shortages exist partly because demand has never been this high and ports have never been asked to operate 24/7. There's also been a several-year shortage of truck drivers because wages have remained narrowly close to the bone, and profit for independent drivers has been difficult to maintain. The number of workers in the rail industry is still down compared to pre-pandemic levels. Railroads, like other industries, had to scale back operations due to the pandemic. They cut costs to prepare for a drop in revenue. Many railway companies furloughed workers, forced employees to use paid time off, or switched to part-time schedules. But the economy burst back out of the gates like a locomotive. The companies found that many of these workers were no longer sitting on the sideline, anxiously waiting to return to jobs with employers who so quickly cast them aside when profits dip. Many found employment elsewhere. Rail company CSX is trying to hire almost 500 new conductors to try and meet the surge in demand. So far, it has only been able to recruit 200. While many would like the ports to go to 24/7 operation, in some cases, it can effectively be done with the current levels of the labor force. For instance, in the days after the Biden administration pressed the Long Beach port into 24/7 operation, though the port was open at night, on one night, only one truck came in to pick up a load. Moving the cargo will require commitments from multiple stakeholders and probably easing restrictions on the trucking and shipping industries. Containers. Another major problem with no resolution is that the empty container return system has been broken for years. It's not profitable to ship empty containers, and America doesn't have the exports to fill those containers and send them back on their journey overseas. Even though port authorities have been screaming for over a year at carriers to take back their empty containers, shippers have been slow because there isn't a profit in it. As a result, truckers were blocked from returning empty containers to New York, New Jersey marine terminals more than usual in September due to ongoing congestion. In Los Angeles and Long Beach, reports show truckers that parked empty containers in truck chassis in neighborhood streets. So there's a severe shortage of containers in Asian manufacturing countries, hindering those countries' ability to ramp up production to meet consumer demand. Space. Space is another problem for these ports. When a container is discharged off a ship, it's moved to the container yard within the port. When the customer has completed all necessary paperwork and cleared customs, they can then offload the container on a truck or rail to its final destination. All ports offer a free period of between 3 to 7 days, where the container can sit in this container yard. The container may be moved to an off-yard private depot that is customs bonded and incurs a storage charge, but it still has to clear through the port within the 3 to 7 day period. If it does not, the port will assess a demurrage or detention charge on the shipping line. Many ports have too many containers in the container yard, so they're reaping high profits right now in demurrage fees. When containers are stuck in the port affecting the yard space, the port experiences slow productivity, bursts, container freight stations, and general port congestion. In its simplest terms, it can't take any more ships to offload because there's nowhere to put them. Ships. When global shipping ground to a halt, many shippers who are already operating on thin margins through multinational registries and conglomerates literally abandon ship. Ships are frequently abandoned by their owners if it becomes less expensive than continuing to operate, paying debt, port fees, and even crew wages. Right now, there are around 500 container ships not in service because their holding companies went out of business or simply wrote them off as a loss. Some crew members have been stranded for over a year without pay and without the means to return home. This abandonment is referred to as the cancer of the shipping industry. The result is that though demand was low, which created the circumstances for the abandonment, it is now high, but there's no way to either hold the ship owners accountable or to press these cargo ships back into service. So, fleet capacity remains low. There are approximately 17,000 general cargo ships, 12,000 bulk cargo ships, and 5,360 container ships in the world fleet. Not all of these are dedicated to the United States. Some ships were decommissioned following the global economic downturn of 2008. Many more cargo ships and cruise ships were decommissioned following the international economic stoppage of 2020. Added to the list of abandoned ships, and capacity is a problem. Global container shipping players like AP Moller-Maersk and Hapag-Lloyd are flush with cash from the soaring shipping rates, and they are pressing into service every ship they can acquire. Even with that effort, there's still no profit in them being anchored offshore, and the extra capacity is offset somewhat by the lack of containers. Also, pressing abandoned ships back into service is a diplomatic and bureaucratic Sisyphean task. These ships don't make money beyond a few added charges when they sit at anchor off the coast, but they don't lose tons of money either. Ship owners can pass a cost on to the consumers. In the early days of the buildup of the flotilla, many ships were routed the extra week's journey to ports in the Gulf and East Coast, but that secret got out. Now East Coast ports are backed up as well. The only solution is to increase the offload and shipping capacity of Long Beach and Los Angeles ports. Possible solutions. Temporarily suspend parts of the Jones Act. The Jones Act was created after World War I to encourage American shipping. Essentially, it addresses cabotage, which is the transportation of goods between ports in the same country. It establishes that goods traveling over American waterways, all goods transported between the United States ports, must be shipped on vessels built, owned, and operated by American citizens or permanent residents. That sounds great, but American shipping of goods on U.S. waterways accounts for an ever-shrinking amount of traffic, and the American fleet capacity has shrunk tremendously as well. Enticing foreign-owned and operated vessels to navigate U.S. waterways to ports further inland would keep shipping costs down and stimulate the shipping industry as a whole. There are parts of the Jones Act we don't want to get rid of, chiefly protecting American crew members and ensuring the security of our waterways. Still, the boost to the shipping industry's ability to go the final few miles to smaller inland ports with smaller ships would ease the strain on larger container ships. This seems like a better solution than what companies like Genco Shipping and trading and agribusiness giant Cargill are currently doing. They are seeking approval from ship safety certifiers to prepare some of their dry bulk vessels to carry containers. Loading containers on a ship designed to carry dry bulk products. What could go wrong? A better solution that could be affected by the suspension of parts of the Jones Act would be to allow smaller cargo vessels of foreign origin to transport directly from their shipping country down American waterways to ports further inland. This would alleviate at least a little of the bottleneck currently being seen along coastal ports. It would also help the flow of goods and energy into America. Currently, there are no domestic liquid natural gas tankers. Though natural gas is abundant in America, even a surplus, some areas can't get a supply. Because of this, parts of New England relied on importing their natural gas from Tobago, Trinidad, and Russia in recent years, and liquid natural gas producers have found that shipping their LNG overseas will command a higher price. The temporary suspension of parts of the Jones Act might alleviate congestion, increase competition, and lower shipping costs, thereby decreasing costs to consumers. However, it isn't likely to happen in any meaningful way. Americans would be reluctant to allow ships from Russia, Sierra Leone, or even Mexico to pass through their waterways to ports upriver. Deploy the Army and Guard. To be completely honest, truck driving has to be one of the most demanding jobs in the world, and shipping companies and port managers don't make it any easier. It's long hours away from home. Right now, it's waiting in lines outside of ports and maybe still not getting a load. For the ports to get better shippers, ports need to make it better for the truckers. A possible temporary solution to the problem here in America is to deploy the Army and the National Guard. A declaration of an emergency in the collapse of the supply chain would seem to qualify for this, would allow the temporary reassignment of 88 ILMS motor transport operators to fill the gaps in the labor shortage being experienced in the trucking industry. Military motor transport operators are primarily responsible for supervising or operating wheel vehicles to transport personnel and cargo. They are the backbone of the military support and sustainment structure, providing advanced mobility on and off the battlefield. Job training for a motor transport operator requires 10 weeks of basic combat training and 6 weeks of advanced individual training. Part of this time is spent in the classroom and part takes place in simulation. However, more than 200 training hours are spent in actual vehicles and field training environments. Then they move on to their military jobs, where they drive everything from parts to produce to ordnance all day long. Their current training and experience meet or exceed that of civilian drivers. Many of these 88 mics will be seeking jobs in the civilian sector in the future anyway. Commercial experience will only make their transition to civilian life all that much easier. Partnering military resources with commercial operators could be just the rapid flow necessary to break through the bottleneck at the port. All they would need is a completed commercial military waiver form and the orders and permission to do it. Some would argue that this would take jobs away from the civilians, but these are jobs going unfilled right now. Many who have passed their trucking driving school requirements are still waiting for the short-staffed DMV to give them the road test. It seems that there has to be a way to streamline this to get more drivers on the road. When the 88 ILMs return to their military jobs, civilians could be hired to take their place, and the logjam will have been broken and the flow of goods restored. Also, the returning civilian sector will be able to demand better conditions and pay for their return. So what? I don't see shortages. Many continue to dismiss the few shortages they see and shrug off any impact that those might have. Before, a crop was wiped out and the price of that particular grain and products related to it went up a bit. Maybe there was even some panic buying driving up the price. What we see now goes much deeper than that. Pork processors are complaining that they can't package the meat because they don't have the styrofoam trays. They say they can't keep some specialists working for health reasons, so bone and meat can be expected to be more common. Some schools are reporting difficulty getting disposable lunch trays and cutlery. I still see shortages in everything from propane to bottled water to toilet paper. Limit signs are common on many products. So while quantities may be reasonable, packaging these products and getting them to the consumers remains a challenge. If panic buying sets in, the supply chain problems could become exponentially worse. I also watch for runs on dry beans and rice. If you see inventories on these two food staples drop, panic has overcome the minds of the average consumer. The less directly observed impact of these mini shortages is a price increase on everything. The price of beef, chicken, gas, and 1,000 other products has been inching up for weeks now. These prices will continue to go up as long as the bottleneck at the ports remains. Inflation dynamics affect each person differently. Perhaps it's a ceramic filter you can't get now. Maybe it's a steak that's out of budget for you this month. Whatever the product is for you, you will see price increases on almost everything you can think of stemming from this continued port blockage. For many, it will be more than just an inconvenience. And for people who have been prepping for a while, it's more of a hassle as you turn to your preps and skills. Watch for panic buying. Standard prepping supplies like Augustin Farms, which have temporarily suspended operations because of the supply chain disruptions, will be in greater demand with lower available inventories. Watch that the count of ships in the flotilla off the coast goes down and not up. Watch that weather and heating oil and natural gas supplies and distribution won't become a more significant problem. Watch for ongoing cyber attacks on our infrastructure. Watch for a shortage of available shipping vessels. That will mean the backlog at the ports is extending all the way down the supply chain to the manufacturers. Though many can shrug off the impact of shortages, each is a minor blow that weakens the overall body of the country. A larger, more impactful event could be a knockdown punch that could keep you from being able to dismiss the shortages and price increases you now see so easily. Watch for consumers to lower their expectations for a holiday season, and watch for more people to wake up to the ideal of prepping as a result of what they're seeing. A few days ago, I was driving to downtown Los Angeles to watch the Dodgers play the Braves in Game 3. That was a fun game. I was driving on the 91 East and on the 91 West, the main corridor connecting Los Angeles with the rest of the country. I saw nothing but trucks lined up heading east from LA and Long Beach. And that's a great sign that the congestion at the ports is clearing, and it means things are moving in the right direction. The current administration has encouraged states to license truck operators at a faster pace. It has garnered commitments from many retailers to step up their operations and receiving capabilities. It remains to be seen what effect this will have on the larger problem. Personally, barring any significant blows, I see the supply chain somewhat restoring itself. The takeaway for me and many in the prepping community is just how fragile the whole system really is. It's been brought to its knees, and any significant further blows could knock it out altogether. Hopefully, we will learn from this that our dependence on a fragile system and reliance on foreign governments to supply us with things we should be making and producing right here isn't really in our best interest. What's your forecast? Do you see the supply chain restoring itself, or are we only at the beginning of this crisis that will get much worse before it gets any better? Let us know in the comments below. I try to read many of the comments and respond to them when I can. That's typically within the first hour of releasing a video. I can notify you when other videos become available, only if you take that step to subscribe to this channel. As always, please stay safe out there.